good afternoon to everybody who is joining us today from Europe, and good morning to everybody who is joining from the US. Welcome to another discussion devoted to Central and Eastern Europe with a focus on Bulgaria. Our series is part of the Engaging Central Europe program of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which is a non-profit policy organization committed to the idea that the United States and Europe are stronger together. You can read more about the program on our website, but what we're trying to do with a series of discussions, articles and publications is to support democratic resilience and rule of law, citizen participation and regional cooperation. I would like to remind you that today's discussion will be recorded and you can access it on YouTube, on our channel of the GMF, and please write your questions in the chat in case you would like to ask any questions. I will try to of course bring them to the attention of our speakers as much as possible. Once again, my name is Asya Metodieva, and I will have the pleasure to moderate today's discussion focused on Black Sea security, Bulgaria's role, and the needs for regional strategy. A few words from me in the beginning. What we can see for like 2 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is that tensions in the Black Sea region raise concerns about its security, and Russian forces in the Black Sea have been significantly weakened, but the Kremlin still seeks to prevent the concentration of NATO forces there. Moscow has repeatedly attacked Ukrainian infrastructure, as we could witness in the past years, and has put countless mines in the Black Sea. It also keeps trying to prevent Ukrainian grain from reaching the world market. A comprehensive NATO strategy for the Black Sea requires a more unified voices from the allies in the region. Meanwhile, we can see that we have different interests, different diplomatic strategies. We also see Turkey is increasing its regional role and ambitions, while Bulgaria and Romania are committing to military modernization. However, this depends also on domestic political dynamics. How all these dynamics impact Bulgaria's role in the Black Sea security and, of course, other actors in the region? Do the complex relationship among the regional actors lead to less security? And can actually smaller states like Bulgaria have stronger voice within NATO? All these questions are for our panelists. They will engage, of course, with some of them and maybe bring some more. And they will, of course, highlight key challenges and possibly solutions to all these dilemmas. Now I'm excited to introduce each of our speakers. Our first speaker is a non-resident senior fellow with the Transatlantic Security Initiative in the Atlantic Council Center for Security and Strategy. He served as a university professor, distinguished research fellow, and the Theodore Roosevelt Chair in National Security Affairs at the National Defense University. He was a special assistant to the president and senior director for Europe and Russia with the National Security Council of the United States. He served as deputy commandant and dean of the NATO Defense College in Rome and taught at the United States Military Academy. He recently authored a very interesting paper on the Black Sea security and the need for the comprehensive strategy. Please join me in welcoming Regin Hooker to our panel. Good afternoon to you. And now moving to our next speaker. Our next speaker is a distinguished diplomat and politician with a remarkable career. She served as Bulgaria's ambassador to Turkey from 2015 to 2020, and more recently was a member of the cohort of the Advanced Leadership Initiative at Harvard. She served as a member and deputy speaker of the Bulgarian parliament, but most remarkably, she was the Bulgaria's Minister of Foreign Affairs from 1997 to 2001, a very critical moment for Bulgaria's democratic path. She was a member of the European Parliament and also a president of the Group of Small and Medium Entrepreneurs Europe. Welcome to Nadezhda Nensky to our discussion. And our third speaker is the founder and the president of Sofia Security Forum. He's a former Deputy Minister of Defense of Bulgaria. He has been a career government official in the Ministry of Defense, holding various positions, including Deputy Director for Security and Defense Policy and head of the political cabinet of the Minister of Defense. He also served as a defense and security advisor to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences and lectures at Sofia University. He has a great experience on European defense and also Black Sea security. Recently, our speaker, together with colleagues from two other think tanks from Türkiye and Romania, published a paper with recommendations for a more active role and engagement of NATO in the Black Sea region. I would like to welcome Yordan Bozhilov as our third speaker today. And once again, please write your questions in case you would like to ask specific questions to our speakers, and I will take care of them and make sure that everybody has access to the discussion. Now, without further delay, I would like to give the floor to Richard Hooker with his introductory remarks. Could you please make sure that you unmute yourself so we can hear you?
Okay. Thank you for that introduction, and I'll get right into it. What I'd like to do is take about 15 minutes and provide perhaps a transatlantic view of Black Sea security, where we are now, and perhaps some recommendations on the path ahead. We can begin, I think, by saying that an unstable Black Sea region directly threatens the peace and prosperity of the North Atlantic community, which has been a bedrock of U.S. foreign policy at least since 1945. Russian aggression in the Black Sea region threatens the security of every Black Sea state, but more broadly, the Euro-Atlantic region as a whole, as well as global food security, international economic stability, and the viability of international legal frameworks. So these represent key and important interests for the United States as well as for Europe. A comprehensive long-term regional strategy to cope with this new reality is therefore urgently needed. And to be coherent, it must be nested within a broader, viable transatlantic security architecture anchored in NATO. For the transatlantic community and the littoral Black Sea states, a desirable end state is a stable region which is anchored in the Euro-Atlantic community, where the sovereignty of Black Sea states is respected, international trade and commerce can flourish, and political resilience is enhanced. And I believe that here hard choices and a certain measure of boldness will be required. So a brief overview. Since classical times, the Black Sea region has been a pivot of international trade and commerce, as well as a melting pot and a transfer point for cultural exchange. In geostrategic terms, it served as a terminus for the Silk Road and an international crossroads, while the Bosporus and Dardanelles for centuries constituted one of the world's most important waterways. These factors made the region a strategic prize for the Greeks, the Scythians, the Persians, the Romans, the Huns, Byzantium, the Mongols, the Seljuk and Ottoman Turks, and the Russian Empire. Russia and Turkey fought 12 wars across 4 centuries, largely over control of Crimea and the Black Sea, while England and France fought Russia over Crimea from 1853 to 1856 to prevent further Russian expansion in the region at the expense of a tottering Ottoman Empire. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin sought to reincorporate Ukraine into its territory and extend its dominance over the Black Sea region. Today, its control of Crimea and the northern waters of the Black Sea, although contested, give it leverage over the Ukrainian regional and international economies, as well as strategic advantages for the projection of military force across the region. The states surrounding the Black Sea, Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Georgia, generate nearly $3 trillion in GDP, include more than 300 million people, and host assortments of interconnectors that facilitate trade and energy flows between Europe, Eurasia, and the Middle East, and globally beyond. The Black Sea is a maritime conduit for much of the world's grain supply, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine has contributed markedly to rising prices for food, fuel, and fertilizer, with Russia's invasion causing an unprecedented shock to the global food system. The Black Sea region is thus a critical geostrategic intersection between Europe and Asia with global importance. Instability in the Black Sea region is manifested by the fragility of its democratic systems, uneven economic performance, energy dependence, and open conflict. So a few words about regional challenges and threats. Black Sea states are principally challenged by Russian malign activity, but also by energy dependence, a measure of political fragility, and economic underperformance. Previous attempts to solve regional disputes and address security threats through diplomacy, for example, through the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Organization of the Black Sea Cooperation, the Budapest Memorandum, the 2008 Bucharest Summit from NATO, Minsk I and Minsk II, the Normandy format, and various other bilateral diplomatic overtures all failed due to Russian intransigence and territorial ambitions. Opportunities do exist for stabilizing the Black Sea region and improving the economies and the political stability of Black Sea states, but most of these require an amelioration of the Russian threat. Until then, the Black Sea will likely remain a conflict zone and progress will remain elusive. So some recommendations. An effective Black Sea strategy should seek to solve the root causes of instability and not so much nibble at the margins. If Ukraine is successful in ejecting Russian forces from its territory, then opportunities can exist for diplomacy to create new conditions to stabilize the region. For example, by offering sanctions relief based on positive Russian behavior. These would include the removal of Russian forces from Georgia and Moldova, a restart of arms control negotiations, closer economic integration of Black Sea states with the West, and a corresponding increase in prosperity and standards of living, stronger democratic institutions and political stability, a reduction in energy dependence on Russia, improved relations with Turkey, and a relaxation of tensions and lowered potential for conflict in the region. Now, in some capitals, the prevailing view is that expelling Russian forces from Ukraine is unlikely. But I would suggest that a deeper analysis perhaps challenges this view. The Russian force that entered Ukraine in February of 2022 has been largely shattered. Russian ammunition stocks, especially precision-guided munitions, have been depleted and replacement efforts hampered by sanctions. Poorly trained and unmotivated conscripts, recalled reservists, and prison convicts have been impressed into service to fill gaps in Russian units, but their performance has been unimpressive. Overall, Russian generalship and campaign strategy have been poor, while Russian air and naval forces have performed below expectations. Hundreds of thousands of military-aged males have fled the country, contributing to a manpower crisis that must inevitably bring pressure to bear on Putin's regime. The Ukrainian armed forces have suffered high casualties as well, but their morale and will to fight remain strong. The people of Ukraine overwhelmingly oppose ceding land to Putin in exchange for an unlikely peace. Ukraine continues to field trained, well-equipped new formations, even while filling gaps in already existing units. Ukrainian manpower reserves are still adequate, and its leadership and generalship are clearly superior to Russia's. But the next point, I think, is critically important. If provided with certain needed capabilities, above all, long-range fires, air power, and adequate artillery ammunition, then Ukraine's recovery of its national territory is very possible. But without these capabilities, it's more likely that the conflict will degenerate into yet another frozen conflict on Russia's periphery. Deterring Russian aggression in the region also depends on more capable in-place forces. So here NATO and the EU can and should provide needed economic and security assistance. For smaller, weaker states like Georgia and Moldova, this means credible, modernized ground forces in division strength, along with stronger and better air and coastal anti-ship defense, backed up by trained reserves. For Romania and Bulgaria, less threatened by Russian ground forces, but vulnerable to attack by ground and sea-launched ballistic missiles, it means more and better air defense and anti-ship missile defenses, as well as more capable naval forces. NATO tripwire forces in the form of battalion battle groups can also help to show alliance solidarity and to remind potential aggressors that an attack on one means an attack on all. If supported by Turkey, a standing naval task force, perhaps based at Constanza, would support maritime deterrence. If not, post-conflict rotations of NATO warships, augmented by Black Sea naval units, can substitute. These forces would not pose an offensive threat to Russian territory, but ensure that NATO maritime deterrence is effective across the region. But let's be clear, stabilize the Black Sea region requires more than military action and goes well beyond Ukraine. The neighboring states of Georgia and Moldova have weak militaries and economic and political challenges based in part on continued occupation of parts of their territory by Russian troops, but also due to a lack of integration with the West. As with Romania and Bulgaria, membership for them in NATO and the EU offers security guarantees as well as economic and political assistance that can stabilize and improve conditions both internally and across the region. Deferring membership until these states meet stringent standards only locks them into Russia's orbit. So, in my opinion, accession should be expedited, accompanied by focused efforts to help them meet accession standards, but perhaps delayed until the current conflict in Ukraine is resolved. Meanwhile, the West continues to hold some severe sanctions in reserve and diplomatic steps to pressure major powers like India, Brazil, South Africa, and above all, China to suspend support to Moscow can be intensified. Here, the importance of international organizations can be leveraged. In the information domain, potential exists to exploit disaffection between oligarchs and Putin's power vertical, estranged military and intelligence officials, and an increasingly resentful population traumatized by huge military casualties and economic hardship. During the Cold War, the US government was organized and focused on this terrain, and I believe it can be again. So with these considerations in mind, I would say the following concluding recommendations can underpin a successful and effective strategy for the Black Sea. So first, the proximate cause of instability and conflict in the Black Sea region must be acknowledged primarily as Russia, driven by a desire to reintegrate former imperial territories and reestablish Russia as a world power. Directly or indirectly, the fear of Russia has worked to keep Black Sea states out of NATO and out of the European Union, their best hopes for security and prosperity. NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia, though supported at the Bucharest summit in 2008, has been delayed indefinitely across several US administrations and in European capitals for fear of provoking Russian aggression. Well, that policy unfortunately failed. Decisions to exclude or delay NATO and EU membership for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia instead encouraged Russian aggression and discouraged closer integration with Europe and the West. in effect, Moscow was given a veto on these decisions. Even as Albania, Montenegro, and Northern Macedonia, small states with weak militaries and economies and histories of corruption, were rapidly brought into NATO, the collective decision of alliance members to exclude certain Black Sea states helped to bring on the current tragedy in Ukraine and destabilize the Black Sea, which is now an active conflict zone. Today, NATO and EU members remain privately divided on the question of a negotiated settlement that would leave Russia in possession of some Ukrainian territory in exchange for a presumed cessation of hostilities. The UK, Poland, the Baltic states, and the Nordic countries generally support Ukraine's desire to recover its occupied lands, while the US, Germany, France, Turkey, and others appear open to negotiations short of a decisive Ukrainian victory. These would almost certainly leave Crimea and/or the Donbass in Russian hands, freezing the conflict, preventing economic gains, and perpetuating an unstable Black Sea region that serves Russian interests but works against ours. Further aggression in other Russian imperial territories would therefore be likely. This division constitutes a potential cleavage within the alliance that the Russians are sure to exploit. Over time, there is a growing risk that Western sanctions and popular support for Ukraine will erode, a compelling reason to support Ukraine in ending the conflict quickly. The US, NATO, and the EU should maximize the tools available now while they are still available and effective. At the present time, tough sanctions and successful Ukrainian military operations have weakened Russia and offer opportunities for a new strategic approach to the region. That approach should be grounded in providing the assistance required to achieve a Ukraine whole and free, firming up NATO's presence in Bulgaria and Romania, providing security assistance to Black Sea states to strengthen deterrence and defense, leveraging economic sanctions to remove Russian troops from Georgia and Transnistria, and early membership in NATO, the EU, OECD, and the Three Seas Initiative for those Black Sea states that are now outside the transatlantic community. Should international organizations continue to refuse timely admission, a US coalition could be formed to take on some of these tasks. Introducing NATO troops into the conflict is not required or desirable, as properly equipped and supplied Ukrainian forces, in my opinion, are capable of restoring Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. These steps will require muscular diplomacy, strong leadership, and firm resolve. The stakes are high and go well beyond Ukraine to affect not only the Black Sea region and the European security space, but the global international order. I'd wrap up by saying that the transatlantic community has weathered many serious crises and come through stronger and more resilient than ever. With confident and energetic leadership, these outcomes, I believe, can be achieved by removing the Russian military threat and integrating Black Sea states more closely with the West. The US and the transatlantic community can set conditions for a more stable, peaceful, and prosperous region for decades to come. So thank you for your kind attention, and I look forward to your questions in the question and answer period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hooker. Very, very interesting arguments that I will be happy to develop further. One of them, and dilemma for many countries, for the countries in the region, is like how to promote regional security without necessarily sending the message for a threat to Russia. How, you know, to create this sense in the region. Also, how to deal with the divisions in NATO. That you mentioned, but also the role of diplomacy. And now I would like to pass the floor to Nadezhda Nensky with maybe an introductory question about the diplomatic mechanisms that have been used, were they used, and what is the potential actually of diplomatic mechanisms to promote regional security in the Black Sea region. Could you please unmute yourself? Yes, thank you.
here it is. Oops.
Here now.
Just a second. Is it okay right now? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Asi. Before answering to your question, I want to make a few points which probably could be a matter of debate during this workshop, and I think they will be important for future consideration on behalf of NATO, European Union, and other countries. Because to deal with the new reality, as Dr. Hooker said, we need a comprehensive long-term regional strategy, and this strategy should address the root causes of instability and require strong leadership, cooperation, investment, but also difficult choices. I'm sure that one of the things that is at stake for the stability and security of the Black Sea is the future status of Crimea. It's not a coincidence that before starting the full-scale war in Ukraine in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. So the Russian airspace moved about 440 kilometers to the west. And one day after this annexation, Bulgaria woke up with a common air border with Russia. In fact, insisting on NATO to withdraw from Bulgaria and Romania, Russia is actually talking about a corridor to the Republic of Serbia that can pass through Bulgaria, through Romania, or through both. This reminds me very much about the Kosovo crisis, when a bold decision of the Bulgarian government, of which at that time I had the honor to be a foreign minister, prevent Russian planes, aircrafts from flying over our territory and landing at Pristina airport. At the time, Bulgaria was not a member of NATO nor of European Union, but the government, although under the pressure of Russian-inspired internal protests and fierce diplomatic pressure, took this decision which largely predetermined the positive outcome of the war. Today, Bulgaria has confirmed its readiness to strengthen cooperation aimed at ending the unprovoked war of Russia against Ukraine and restoring Ukrainian territory and integrity and sovereignty with its international recognized borders. We agreed to support bilateral cooperation for the joint production of weapons, equipment, and ammunition, as well as the implementation of the Memorandum of Intent between the Ministry of Defense of Bulgaria and Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Further development of cooperation in the field of restoring security in the Black Sea region was agreed, noting the importance of holding the second conference on the Black Sea security of the International Crimean Platform, which will be held in Sofia this coming April. I think that the most, and I fully agree with Dr. Hooker, that the most serious risk to the Black Sea region is Russia's escalation in response to more aggressive Western sanctions, military support, or military action. It seems for me very unlikely Russia to use nuclear weapons, given the severity of the expected responses, the risk of uncontrolled escalation, and Chinese response. But at the same time, I think that the public debate of whether Russia will attack a NATO country and or use nuclear weapons is absolutely counterproductive for the West and helps Russian propaganda to present Putin as invincible hero, as someone who can take over the whole world. The West must reassure the public that such an option is impossible because NATO is strong and any threat against NATO country would lead Russia to catastrophic consequences. I think that the main danger are the Putin's attempts to break the rapprochement of NATO and European Union by exploring the cracks in the alliance approach to Black Sea issues, as it was mentioned. And over the time, the donor fatigue and competing interests such as China, climate change, and domestic politics can widen these cracks, and we have to prevent this. We must preserve the unity of the alliance and avoid escalation across the nuclear threshold. Russia's military failure in Ukraine provide opportunities to solve a number of regional security problems. And on the contrary, even partial Russian success would threaten the rapprochement of NATO and the European Union. And I think it will send a very bad signal to the rest of the world, to the countries of the former Soviet bloc, because countries of Eastern Europe are very sensitive about the possibility of NATO and European Union to create this space of security and stability, which is so much needed and which was the very cause for all of us to join the two unions. That's why the main thing now is to keep the unity and to address the causes for the instability of the region, and to prevent this conflict in Ukraine to transform into a frozen conflict, which will continue instability and will extend a possible future aggressions toward other countries in the region.
Thank you for this very, very important points. How to keep the unity? It's maybe a question that it will be good to discuss a bit later in the discussion. But I would like now to pass the floor to Jordan Bujilov with introductory question about the role of Bulgaria and whether countries, small countries like Bulgaria, can actually contribute to this unity of NATO, and also to have a stronger voice when it comes to regional security in the Black Sea.
Yeah, thank you, Asya, for the question and for the invitation to discuss Black Sea region. And I fully agree with Professor Hooker that potentially Black Sea region has a huge potential as a regional crossroad of cultures, trade routes, continents. And there was an optimism before the annexation of Crimea, but this optimism unfortunately vanished. By the way, there were several sub-regional formats for cooperation in different spheres, in economic, trade, security sphere. Now, nothing of this functions. But let me maybe, before starting to answer your question, Asya, just to give you my perspective on the region, because it is really very complicated and complex security environment, which of course predetermines the actions of NATO and other regional countries. And of course, the main threat for the security in the region comes from Russia and from Russian aggression against Ukraine. And unfortunately, we cannot exclude any possible scenario of development of this conflict. The war, which is just a few hundred kilometers, as Ms. Nainsky mentioned, from Bulgaria, is the main threat to our national security. And we acknowledge this, and it is clearly stated by Bulgaria. But unfortunately, we can't exclude scenario in which the war spills over to other countries, or a NATO member state is attacked or involved in the military confrontation with Russia. What we see in the region, what we see from Russian activities, Russia is ready to further escalate its war against Ukraine. And Russia has means and capabilities for this escalation. And let me also mention, I think Ms. Nadezhda Nainsky also touched upon, after annexation of Crimea, Russia built military superiority in the Black Sea region. Russians' military capabilities exceed capabilities of NATO countries, Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. Moreover, Russia built an A2AD system, which, of course, again, prevents NATO from the freedom of maneuvering, of freedom of entering in the region. So Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey as NATO countries have military capabilities, but comparing to Russia, they are not sufficient. This is one issue. The second issue, which is, I would call it an obstacle, the provisions of Montreux Conventions, of Montreux Convention from 1936. Turkey effectively closed the straits for NATO vessels of non-Black Sea member countries. So no vessels from NATO country can enter the Black Sea, which is a huge problem for us. Of course, having in mind the imbalance of military power in the region. But at the same time, what is important, Turkey blocked Russian vessels from entering Black Sea, vessels which are not permanently based in Black Sea harbors, which of course is a contribution to the non-escalation of the conflict. So this is the situation from the military perspective. As I said, Russia is ready to use forces and escalate the situation. For example, Russia declares zones dangerous for navigation, including in exclusive economic zones of NATO member countries. Last year, Russia actually blocked Bulgarian exclusive economic zone for about 9 months. So we are not being able to explore the resources. It impeded the freedom of navigation and, of course, created a lot of security problems. So this is the situation, how it looks like. Because of this peculiarity of the region and because of Montreux Convention and, of course, Turkey's decision to close the straits and the inability of NATO to bring naval capabilities in the Black Sea, we can only strengthen onshore capabilities. And Professor Hooker already mentioned that we desperately need to strengthen air defense, coastal defense. We desperately need means of surveillance and reconnaissance. So what is the most important is, again, to build credible defense, having in mind, of course, all these limitations. Let me go further and describe the complexity of the security situation in the region, what I mentioned in my speech before. It is really very complicated and complex security environment or insecurity environment. There are many risks arising from the war of Russia against Ukraine, and I'll mention just a few of them. We have so-called free-floating sea mines. It is estimated that between 500 and 700 sea mines are placed along the coast of Russia and Ukraine. But what is important here, about 80 free-floating sea mines were detected and destroyed in the territorial waters of Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. Several ships were already hit by sea mines. The insecurity of navigation skyrocketed the prices for insurances. Companies operate in the Black Sea with old vessels only, which create again further risks for the environment. And mentioning environmental risks, I have to list several. For example, we have destroyed military equipment. We have destroyed civilian infrastructure. There were fires caused by the military activities. There is a pollution caused by use of different types of weapons. Just in the brackets, almost all of the buildings which are destroyed by Russia are built in 50s, 60s, or 70s, when asbestos was largely used. So when you destroy, when you bomb such houses, it spreads asbestos, which of course pollutes the territory. We have millions of refugees. Already, our previous speakers mentioned the inability of Ukraine to ship the produced food to other regions, which contributes to global food insecurity. Bulgaria and other countries cannot fully use their economic zones for fishery, for extraction of gas, for trade, etc., etc., etc. On the other side, Russia is largely using all sorts of malicious influence and hybrid warfare against our countries. Disinformation, propaganda, cyber attack. Russia aims to divide our societies. Russia tries to destroy the unity of NATO and EU. And having said that, I'll mention that Russia uses all leverages it has against us. For example, if we take Bulgaria, Russia uses very well and very effectively the pro-Russian part of Bulgarian population, pro-Russian political parties and organization, Orthodox Church, etc., etc., etc. And this is only part, of course, of the risks and challenges in the region. There are many, many others, of course. There are risks of irregular migration. Of course, these risks are not directly linked to Russian aggression, but these risks contribute to the general insecurity in our region. Professor Hooker rightly mentioned the Western Balkans and the region which is directly linked with Black Sea region. There is a still unfinished process of accession of Black Sea and the Western Balkan countries. So it is again part of what we call deficit of security in the region. So what to do? What should be our responses? First, of course, support Ukraine. No doubt that we have to strengthen and provide everything necessary to Ukraine so that Ukraine can defend itself. Second, NATO must build credible deterrence and defense in the region for the member countries. I mentioned that Turkey has a very peculiar position which impedes the rapid buildup of naval capabilities. We can, of course, build onshore capabilities, but we will have still deficit because military people, they perfectly know that if you don't have naval capabilities, you cannot project your power and, of course, send right messages to Russia. It is very important to further increase NATO presence in the Black Sea countries. There are already NATO contingencies deployed in Bulgaria and Romania. There are battle groups led by Italy in Bulgaria and France in Romania. This is the right way. The second is to strengthen the regional cooperation between NATO countries, Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. Just recently, these three countries signed an agreement for mine countermeasures, which is a huge contribution to the security. And on the next place, very important, each NATO country has to invest more in developing defense capabilities. And I'll very briefly mention what Bulgaria is doing in this regard. First, Bulgaria started a very ambitious modernization program. This year, Bulgaria will achieve 2% of GDP, and in the coming years, the percentage of GDP will be close to 2.5%, which is very high indicator in NATO. But even with this pretty high percentage, we want to be able to increase our defense capabilities pretty fast. It will take time. That's why we called on NATO countries to consider contribution to the Bulgarian, to the strengthening Bulgarian defense capabilities. From Bulgarian perspective, we shall invest actually in all spheres, and we started already acquisition of F-16 fighters. Next year, first 3 to 5 fighters will arrive on Bulgarian soil. We started construction of 2 patrol vessels. We started the process of acquisition of armored vehicles from the United States. But there are many other projects which shall be started in order to have real credible defense. And here comes the modernization of the air defense system, coastal defense. We desperately need new radars. We have to replace all old equipment which is actually non-compatible with NATO equipment. The most of combat system in Bulgaria are made in 60s, 70s or 80s, and they are according to the standards of the former Warsaw Pact. So it is a huge task for Bulgaria. We are doing a lot, but still we need support from our allies. One of the shortages we have in the region is military mobility. We have to invest greatly in better military mobility in order to be able to move forces across borders. To overcome shortages in the defense capabilities, we of course cooperate with many countries, mainly with the United States. We signed in 2006 an agreement of defense cooperation, which provides us a lot of opportunity for cooperation in defense sphere. But NATO is strong not only with its great military power. The most or very important, it's unity and readiness of countries to implement engagements according to Article 5. And it is very important, of course, to work among countries to invest more in this unity, because Russia is targeting particularly our ability to take decisions and implement decisions. I will finish by saying that, having in mind the complex security environment in the Black Sea, we need a comprehensive approach. As Asia mentioned, Sofia Security Forum and other two think tanks from Romania and Turkey made a study, presented it in November at NATO HQ, and we call for a comprehensive NATO approach, because we have to tackle all these challenges simultaneously. Bulgaria, on its part, is working on its own national foreign strategy, and we are working on our national Black Sea strategy. I do hope that other countries will follow this. We know that United States is already working on such a document. France adopted recently their own strategy. So only with common efforts we can overcome the deficits, and only with common activities we will be able to send right messages to Russia. Thank you very much, and I'm ready for your questions or comments.
Thank you. Thank you for contributing to the discussion with so many important points. I would like to encourage our audience once again to write questions in the chat. I see a few already, and I will keep my right to ask them in a few minutes. But before that, let me ask like a round of questions, each of you, regarding like the key arguments that you mentioned. And my first question would go to Richard Hooker regarding the future of Crimea and the fact that all the players in the Black Sea region actually have different strategic interests, including Russia, including Ukraine, including Turkey, a country which is a NATO member state. Now, in this very, very complex political and security environment, can we imagine and can we expect the efforts of Bulgaria and Romania to actually give them the chance to have a stronger voice? And can we have a comprehensive strategy of NATO for the region, given that we probably still lack a comprehensive approach to Crimea?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's fair to say there's not unanimity inside the alliance on how to confront Russia. So that's our beginning point. Of course, the closer you get to the Russian border, the Baltic states, the Swedes, the Finns, the Poles, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, they have a different perspective on the problem and on the threat than you may find the farther west that you go. And so the Biden administration, France, Germany, and some others inside the alliance have withheld, I would say, as a conscious matter, some capabilities that the Ukrainians need to recover their national territory, and in particular, Crimea. Because without Crimea, Ukraine is little more really than a rump state. So much of its trade depends upon its access to the Black Sea, to shipping lanes, the ability to get its agricultural products out, and so on. And if Russia retains ownership and control of Crimea, then the Ukrainian economy contracts by something on the order of 30%, which is just major. And it destabilizes the entire Black Sea region, because Russia can then call the tune. As we heard in the earlier presentations, it can interfere in freedom of navigation. It can intrude into the exclusive economic zones of Black Sea states. It can do any number of things. When an aircraft takes off from an airport in Bulgaria or Romania, it's almost immediately in the air defense zone of Russian forces because of their presence in Crimea right now. So while there are any number of things that can be done to strengthen Black Sea straits, in my opinion, I really think the key to the problem is to enable the Ukrainians to be successful in their attempts to regain their sovereignty and their territory. If that happens, then all things now become possible. If it doesn't happen, it's difficult to see how we move the needle we change conditions on the ground in a major way to stabilize the region. That would be my perspective.
Thank you. And then to Nadezhda Zelensky about the balance between Bulgaria's balance towards Russia, NATO, Turkey, and its perspective to the Black Sea security, because Yordan Bourgeois mentioned that we've been dealing with a lot of like Russian interference at a political level, at a societal level. And all these dynamics, internal dynamics, can actually reflect Bulgaria's behavior towards regional security and stability. Again, like pointing to the role of diplomacy here, what can be the mechanisms for small states like Bulgaria? And please unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry. First of all, I don't think that Bulgaria is a small state. We are used to call Bulgaria that Bulgaria is a small state, but we are relatively a medium-sized state for the European standards. I think that Bulgaria now has the option of being member both of European Union and NATO, and as a part of this this alliance of the NATO alliance is able to be part of the discussion of the politics of the alliance towards Russia. We don't need to balance between NATO and Russia, which is, I think, very much old thesis from the Russian propaganda that we have to choose between NATO and Russia. We made our choice in favor of the Euro-Atlantic community because we think that we have better guarantees for the national security being part of a democratic alliance that taking care for our security alone. What is important for Bulgaria and for countries like Bulgaria is that NATO has a very a strong determination of preventing a compromise on Ukraine. This is very important because the final target of Russia is not Ukraine. We must remember when Putin, I think during in 2007 during the Munich Security Conference, he said, I'm quoting, I'm not sure about the quote, but in general he said that he's tired by the West. And later he published an essay about Ukraine, and he pretends that Ukraine and Russia are one and the same country, and the people both in Ukraine and Russia are part of the same unity. Those were signals long before the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine that Putin's attentions go far beyond the attack against Ukraine. In fact, he sent two letters, one to the United States and one letter to NATO, in which he claimed for zones of interest again, and he wants to recover the influence of Russia as an empire, as in the time of during the Cold War, which means that Putin doesn't want to negotiate with Zelensky on a peace agreement. Putin wants to negotiate with the United States about a possible outcome of the war, because he wants a multipolar world. He wants to be recognized again as one of the superpowers, which is by law and by reality has all the rights to compete with the United States. That's why it's not, again, it's not about to making a balance between Russia and Turkey, for example, because Turkey is a regional player. But if NATO is not determined and it's not united in its approach towards Ukraine, this encourages a lot of regional players to claim to claim their interests and to try to achieve their regional goals. That's why we have to be very determined, very strong in what we send as a signal to Putin and to Russia, because Putin will stop when he's stopped by NATO and by the international community. He's not going to stop by himself. And this is enormous threat not only for the Black Sea, but as we mentioned, it's enormous threat for Europe, for the entire democratic world, and also is a threat for the principles, values, and the whole, how to say, the whole paradigm of what the democratic world is and how this democratic world is competing with the authoritarian systems and authoritarian world. And I think it's a very historic moment, not just for Ukraine, but also for Europe and for the West, to prove that what we stand for is the same what we are ready to defend, that it's not just words, but it's also commitment, bold decisions, very strong leadership, which is needed right now, both in the United States, of course, but also in Europe. And I think that Russia has been preparing for this war for a long time. That's why the Russian economy now is a military economy. That's why they have all the military equipment, and all the allies of Russia has the ability to contribute to their with ammunitions, with all the equipment to Russia. And the European economy is not a military economy. None of us was expecting, even till the very end, that Russia will start a full-scale war against Ukraine. And the last but not least, the signal of that we will not allow in the 21st century someone to change the borders and to attack a sovereign states by taking territory of these sovereign states and destabilizing the whole region.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions in the chat. I would just keep my right as a moderator to ask one question, Jordan Bourgeau, before I turn to the questions in the chat. You spoke of modernization and what steps Bulgaria is taking to modernize in terms of defense. Romania is also taking steps. Turkey has done a lot in this regard already. The question, though, is about regional cooperation. And when we talk about increased NATO's presence in the Black Sea region and the role of Turkey as a regional power and as a NATO member state, my question is, does Bulgaria see Turkey as an ally with whom they can cooperate over having a stronger voice within NATO, or it's more complex, the security picture?
Of course, Turkey is our ally. We value very much our defense cooperation. I think that this question probably should go primarily to Ms. Neinsky as a former ambassador of Bulgaria to Turkey.
She's absolutely welcome to also.
But let me just say, first, Turkey played an incredible role in Bulgarian transformation and Bulgarian approach to NATO membership. Bulgaria and Romania cooperated in a format 2+2 with Turkey and Greece on our way to NATO membership. We do have a lot of examples of excellent defense cooperation on bilateral basis or regional basis. I already mentioned that Bulgaria, Turkey, and Romania just recently signed an agreement for mine countermeasures. We are working with Turkey on trans-border, how we call it. In general, we'll sign an agreement which will allow Turkish aircraft to cross Turkish-Bulgarian border in the case of operation and vice versa. We do rely on Turkey not only on a military issue, but we cooperate on trans-border or control of migration, which is a huge issue not only for Bulgaria but for the whole European Union. Yes, in the past we had uneasy relations, but currently we fully rely on each other as NATO members. But yeah, this is what I can just say in general, in principle.
And I'm sure that Nadezhda Nainsky maybe can also offer her perspective before we move to the US and like the other players who can contribute. Yes.
Yes, I fully agree with Mr. Buzilov about the military cooperation between Bulgaria and Turkey. Let's not forget that Turkey was one of the strongest supporters of NATO membership of Bulgaria at the time when Bulgaria didn't have too many friends and too many supporters for this. And we highly appreciate their role. The political, what usually brings concern is the political unpredictability sometimes in Turkey, because we should not forget that quite recently there was an idea for building a second, how is this, channel or second road, to open like Bosphorus and Dardanelles to make another water channel. And this was a project which was not greatly supported internationally. And just a few days ago, I heard that this project was cancelled by the court in Istanbul, and the mayor Imamoglu highly appreciate this decision of the court, because this could be very risky for the region of the Black Sea and have unpredictable consequences for the environment, for Montreal, for everything. On the other hand, Russia was very much against this project by her own reasons, but in the context of the war, this could open another front of instability and insecurity. And I think that it was very smart for the time being. Even the ruling party of President Erdogan said that, making comments on the decision of the court, that this project is not on the table right now. It's not a priority for them for now. And maybe for now we can breathe a little bit more freely and not have another question mark in our minds. But in general, I think that the cooperation between the NATO countries in the region is a must, is not a wish. And we all know what could be the consequences for all of us if this tension in the Black Sea continues. And I think that moving back to Crimea, it's very important what will be the response of NATO about the status of Crimea, because just 2 days ago, I think the Russian Russian drones have attacked Odessa from the Black Sea. And this is also another example of the risks we are witnessing every day in the space of above the Black Sea.
Thank you for this this perspective, because it actually you know, like the role of Turkey as you mentioned, like it's very complex. It has this role of being like a regional power, but also as a NATO member, we also rely on Bulgaria relies on it quite a lot. Now, going to the questions in the chat, they're very interesting, and I would like to pass the floor now to Richard Hooker for the first one. The first question: how realistic is the adoption of a discharge petition by the US Congress to allow the adoption of the needed help for Ukraine, worth of $60 billion? Could you please unmute yourself?
Thank you. The short answer is it's very hard to unpack American domestic politics right now. We've gone through a series of speakers of the House of Representatives. The current one is again under fire. The president brought in congressional leaders from both parties just this past week to try to resolve the funding crisis and to sort of free up funds to go to Ukraine. I'm not in a position to anticipate the outcome of that because the Republican majority in the House is razor thin, which in a way gives those radical Republicans much greater power than they would otherwise have. We're in the midst of the final year before the general election. So there's an awful lot that's up in the air right now. I will say, if you contrast where we were in 17 or 18, where the US Congress was overwhelmingly in support of NATO, and today the transformation has been considerable, if not profound. And so the European allies in particular are obviously very concerned about the outcome of the next election in 2024, which could really unsettle the transatlantic relationship in very, very large ways. I do note that the European allies are trying to take steps to fill the void, if you will. They understand that in particular, Ukraine is suffering a critical shortage of artillery ammunition, without which it really can't continue the war very effectively. But that's not going to be enough. I think if the United States doesn't come back in with sustained funding of a considerable level, it will be difficult for Ukraine to carry on.
On the other hand, correct me if I'm wrong, but towards the end of last year, there was the release of this U.S. strategy for the Black Sea region. What is your assessment of it? Do you think that it will have particular effects on the region? And can we expect that the U.S. might actually increase its attention to the region, or it depends on the domestic political situation?
Well, forgive me for being candid, but I think the State Department produced that document under some duress as a result of congressional pressure. If you read it carefully, there are no big steps or big moves contained in that paper. There's a lot of talk about trade relationships and those sorts of things, but in my opinion, the fundamental causes of an unstable region, which are principally Russian aggression and the failure to bring Black Sea states more aggressively into NATO and the European Union and the transatlantic community. To my way of thinking, those are the root causes for an unstable region, and the State Department document didn't really address those in a substantive way. So I was disappointed to see that outcome.
And now you mentioned the role of the European Union. There is a question in the chat to all the speakers, so I will let each of you to decide whether you'd like to contribute. How do you see the EU in the Black Sea security? And especially what you pointed to, the interconnectivity between the Western Balkans region and the Black Sea region in this very unstable times.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll lead off. I see the EU's role primarily as being one of strengthening and enhancing political stability and democratic institutions, and also strengthening the economies of Black Sea states. I see NATO as being the principal security provider there. And I think if we can improve the standard of living and the economic performance of the Black Sea states, then I think the stability of democratic institutions for sure is increased and enhanced. There's no doubt about that. People have a right to look towards a better standard of living for themselves and their families. It's difficult to do that when you're outside the tent. It's easier to do that when you're inside the tent. And I understand that for many EU states, there's going to have to be a migration of their thinking on this issue. But the benefits for all, I think, are evident and are clear. And I hope we move in that direction faster and more aggressively than has been the case in the past. Look, let's be honest, the Russians exercised something like a veto over those moves. And we allowed them to do that because we thought that if we didn't, we would provoke them. And that thinking, I hope, has been discredited by the invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
Somebody else who wants to contribute? Yes, please. Whoever wants to speak first.
Couple of thoughts. First, European Union is not a big player in the sphere of security, of course, and all efforts of European Union were concentrated. I mean, concerning these countries we are talking about, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, all efforts were about helping these countries to modernize economies, to establish a democratic governance, to fight corruption, etc., etc., etc. Of course, this contributes in general to the security, but European Union is not a guarantor and cannot provide capabilities and assets as and of course guarantees as NATO can. But it is important to mention that last year European Union already took a decision to start negotiations with Moldova and Ukraine for membership, which is something tangible and important, having in mind that membership of these countries in NATO is not that clear. I mean, at least in terms of time, because as it has been declared several times by Secretary General of NATO, Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO before the end of the war, before the issues are settled, and before it is clear which is the territory which NATO will defend. So that's why the involvement of European Union and this step forward of European Union and invitation to the countries to start negotiations is very important. And of course, it is a signal to Moscow that it is up to the countries to decide their own future, and it's up to the alliances to decide who will become members of these alliances.
Nadezhda Zelensky also wanted to.
I want to make comments on a more broader aspect. First of all, I believe that European Union must develop a geopolitical capacity. This is a must. I think that if there is something which this war emotionally brought, among other things, is the wake-up call for the European conscience and about the need to take more serious measures vis-a-vis Russia, because we were all witnessing how dependent was Europe economically on Russia, not only gas and oil, but also commodities of all kinds. I think that what must be underlined is that Europe was able to give up with this dependence quite quickly, even more quickly than we were all expecting. And this is probably the good news. What I want to mention also is the 3Cs initiative, which is a very good initiative, is a pragmatic initiative, which still is not constitutionalized. They don't have headquarters, still the fund, the investment fund, in the process of establishing. As far as I know, Bulgaria has proposed 4 projects to be financed by this investment fund. But this is an initiative which European Union, NATO, and all the players from the democratic world must support, because this gives a good perspective, not only economically, but also politically, also in terms of mentality. These nations need to learn how to cooperate and not how to compete as they used to do in the past. Because we all talk about economic perspectives and economic performance, but there will be no economic performance and economic perspective without security. No one will pay serious attention on the region if the region sends signals of unpredictability, instability, and uncertainty. This is, everybody who makes business knows that investors are like deers. They can easily could be frightened by improper measures, by insecurity, because even the corruption is related with the Russian influence. The main source of the corruption in the Balkan countries and the Black Sea countries is the Russian influence. The money comes from Russia. There is no other black money who are able to buy not only a single politicians, but even parties in these countries in the Black Sea, because Russia is using all the means to control the region. And it will be the fact in the future as well. That's why we have to be united, to have, as we started with, a very well-structured tactics and strategy for what to do, how to do, and where to look for allies. And what Mr. Buzilov mentioned about the invitation from the European Union towards the rest of the countries in the Black Sea to join the European Union is a very important, not only economical, but political step vis-a-vis these countries. We also have a lot of instruments which can be used, but the unity of policy is what is required right now.
We have 5 minutes until the end of our discussion, and 2 interconnected questions in the chat. One of them, I think Dr. Hooker can bring his perspective on this. What do you think about the currently unfolding discourse about putting NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine?
I think it's principally the French being the French again. I don't know that it's a serious statement on the part of President Macron. I think we're very far from consensus inside the alliance to do anything of the sort. There would be many other steps, I think, that would come before that: trainers, advisors, that sort of thing. Even in no-fly zone, there would be many things that would happen or would be considered before I think NATO would take on actually putting troops on the ground. Now, if the Russians unexpectedly achieve a major success, manage to cross the Dnieper, threaten Kiev, those sorts of things, then obviously the level of alarm would rise inside the alliance, and I think you could expect deeper discussions on those matters. But right now, I think it's very unlikely.
And maybe the Bulgarian perspective, because this is the other question, the Bulgarian perspective on the French President Macron's statement that nothing can be ruled out in reference to the possible troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Actually, we had pretty heated debate today and yesterday in Bulgaria, including in Bulgarian parliament. Most of the pro-Russian political parties and organizations, they used this to attack the government. The government, which is very pro-NATO, very pro-Euro-Atlanticist, very supportive to Ukraine. So we have to be careful when we use such a language because it can be interpreted in different way. But no, it was clearly declared and stated that NATO should not send troops, and Bulgaria won't send Bulgarian armed forces in Ukraine.
Maybe maybe what Macron is saying is this is the old saying that in order to have peace, you should prepare for the war. Probably this is what the French interpretation of this topic is.
Thank you. We managed to engage with part of the questions in the chat, not with all, but I would like to thank everybody in the audience for being with us today and also bringing their questions to the discussion. To close the discussion, I would like to ask for your assessment and expectation for this year, maybe the next year. Do you see the Black Sea region with less or more security?
I suppose I'll begin. I'm not perhaps as optimistic as I was 12 months ago. The prospects for giving the Ukrainians the capabilities that they need to achieve success on the battlefield do not appear to be high right now. We're entering a period in the United States where we're going to be focused on the election, where we're now less than a year out. And that's going to complicate our politics and complicate our policies. And I don't see the European allies as having the wherewithal to really, in a major way, fill the gap and provide these sort of capabilities that I've talked about: air power, long-range fires, those sorts of things. Above all, ammunition. So I see the Ukrainians as being on the defense, and unfortunately, I have to say right now, the prospects for a frozen conflict look better than even.
I think that this year will be crucial for defending democracy all over the world. And what I want to wish is not to let the internal debates and internal priorities to change our basic values and principles, because we are going to pay a very high price.
Yeah, I think that the situation in the Black Sea in general will depend very much on the situation on the ground in Ukraine, how the war is developing. We have to look at different factors and their influence on the situation on the ground. Of course, the major one is we'll be able to provide necessary military equipment and ammunitions to Ukraine to defend itself, because unfortunately I still think that everything is possible. All scenarios are still open, in general, I think that we can expect different developments in the Black Sea, and I'm frankly speaking not big optimist about solving all these issues in the Black Sea in the coming years, not even this or in the next year, but it's going to be very, very long environment of insecurity.
We don't end on an optimistic note, but hopefully a lot of the arguments you brought to the discussion today will help actually policymakers and NATO and allies to create better and more efficient policies when it comes to security in the Black Sea. On behalf of the GMF and me personally, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you for participating in today's discussion, and everybody who joined us from across the ocean and Europe. The discussion will be, as I said, available on our YouTube channel. So please, if you would like to go back to it and check it out, you can do it. Thank you once again, and hope to see you soon on other events of the GMF.
Thank you.
Thank you.